Hello, and welcome back to Lonely-ish, the podcast about loneliness. My name's Ish, and sometimes I feel lonely. I want to start with a question. When was the last time you sat somewhere without a purpose? Not walking to get somewhere, not listening to a podcast, not checking your phone, not exercising, performing, producing, or improving yourself. Just being. I ask because recently I've been reading about something called forest bathing, and despite the name, it involves no water, no swimming, and thankfully no awkward changing rooms. Forest bathing is simply the practice of spending time among trees and allowing yourself to notice the natural world through your senses. And the more I've thought about it, the more I've wondered whether what makes it so appealing isn't really about trees at all. Maybe it's about connection, and maybe it's about loneliness. So I headed to a local woodland, put my phone away, and spent an hour or so wandering among the trees. No destination, no podcast, no step count to hit, no photographs to take, just me and the forest. What surprised me wasn't that I had some life-changing revelation. It was something much simpler. For an hour or so, I felt present. And that got me thinking about loneliness in a completely different way. I'd love to tell you that I emerged from the woods transformed, that I communed with nature, hugged a tree, and unlocked some great secret of the universe. Unfortunately, none of that happened. What actually happened was much more ordinary. At first, I felt restless. My brain kept racing. Should I walk faster? Should I be listening to something? Am I doing this properly? It's amazing how difficult it can be to simply be somewhere without a goal, without a distraction, without a purpose. But after a while, something started to shift. I noticed the patterns of sunlight through the leaves. I noticed the sounds of birds I'd normally overlook. I noticed how many shades of green there are in a woodland. And perhaps most importantly, I stopped thinking so much about myself. For a brief period, I wasn't replaying conversations, worrying about work, or mentally preparing for tomorrow. I was just there, and that felt surprisingly rare, just for my mind to be still. So what exactly is forest bathing? The practice comes from Japan, where it is known as Shinrin Yoku, which roughly translates as taking in the forest atmosphere. It emerged in the 1980s as a way of encouraging people to reconnect with nature and slow down. Importantly, it isn't hiking, it's not exercise, it's not about reaching a destination. It's about engaging your senses. Looking, listening, smelling, feeling, noticing. It's less about doing and more about being, which sounds easy, but I think many of us have forgotten how to do it. When we spend time in forests, we're exposed to natural compounds released by trees called phytoncides. Research suggests that they may help reduce stress and support our immune system. And while that's fascinating, if I'm honest, I don't think that's the reason this experience stayed with me. Because sometimes we have a habit of turning everything into a life hack, as if the value of a walk among trees depends on whether it makes us more efficient afterwards. Maybe some things are valuable simply because they help us feel alive. Maybe beauty has value. Maybe attention has value. Maybe stillness has value. Maybe spending an hour among trees doesn't need to be justified by anything at all. As I walked through the woods, I found myself thinking about solitude. Not loneliness, solitude. And I realised we don't talk about solitude very much at all. We're constantly told to connect, to network, to engage, to be available, to stay in touch. But solitude is something different. It's not isolation. It's not withdrawal. It's choosing to spend time alone without immediately trying to fill the silence. And I think a lot of us have become uncomfortable with that. The moment we're left alone, we reach for something. Our phones, music, a podcast, the news, anything to keep ourselves occupied. I'm certainly guilty of that. So part of what felt unusual about forest bathing was that there wasn't much to distract me. There was nowhere to hide, no endless stream of information, no notifications, just me and my own thoughts. At first that felt uncomfortable, but then it became peaceful. And I realised something. I wasn't lonely. I was alone. And those aren't the same thing. Loneliness feels like an absence, like something important is missing. Solitude at its best feels complete. Not because we don't need other people, we absolutely do. We need friendship, love, conversation and community. But perhaps learning to be comfortable in our own company helps us approach those relationships differently. We're no longer asking other people to rescue us from ourselves. We're learning how to be with ourselves first. The trees seemed to teach that lesson quietly. They weren't entertaining me. They weren't judging me. They weren't validating me. They were simply there. And somehow that made it easier for me to be there too. I left thinking that perhaps solitude is a skill, a muscle that many of us rarely use. And like any muscle, it feels awkward when we first start exercising it. But perhaps that's one of the hidden gifts of forest bathing. It doesn't help us escape ourselves. It helps us become more comfortable meeting ourselves. The more I reflected on the experience, the more I kept coming back to the theme of loneliness. Because I was physically alone in that woodland, and nobody was with me, nobody was talking to me, nobody even knew where I was, yet I felt connected. More connected perhaps than I sometimes do after an evening spent scrolling through social media. And that made me wonder if loneliness is sometimes less about the absence of people and more about the absence of connection. Not just connection with others, connection with ourselves, connection with where we are, connection with the world around us. Forest bathing seemed to create space for that connection. One thing that struck me was how companionable the forest felt. That might sound odd. Just stay with me here. When you're standing quietly among trees, you're surrounded by life. Birds calling to one another, leaves moving in the wind, insects getting on with lives entirely unrelated to yours. And somehow that reminds you that you're part of something larger. I think loneliness often shrinks our world until we're trapped inside our own thoughts. The forest seemed to gently widen my perspective again. As if for a moment I felt like I belonged to the world around me, not just stuck inside my own head. The thing I keep coming back to is this. For that hour, nobody wanted anything from me. I didn't have to perform. I didn't have to achieve. I didn't have to impress. The trees didn't care about my inbox, my achievements, or my mistakes. And there was something incredibly freeing about that. Perhaps that's one reason nature can feel so restorative. It allows us to exist without judgment. And when we're struggling with loneliness, that can be a powerful thing. Because loneliness often involves feeling disconnected from others, from ourselves, from the wider world. And sometimes connection doesn't begin with another conversation. Sometimes it begins with paying attention. Sometimes that begins with a slow walk among trees. Here's a forest walk meditation to give you a taste. Take a moment to settle into a comfortable position. Allow your shoulders to soften. Let your hands rest easily. And if it feels comfortable, gently close your eyes. Take a slow breath in and a gentle breath out. Again, breathing in and breathing out. There's nowhere you need to be right now. Nothing you need to do. Just this moment. Now, I'd like you to imagine something. Imagine you've left your phone behind. No notifications, no messages, no demands on your time. Just you. And ahead of you, a quiet woodland path. Begin to walk slowly along the trail. Notice the ground beneath your feet. Perhaps it's soft with fallen leaves. Perhaps there are roots and small stones beneath the surface. Feel your feet connecting with the earth as you move, step by step. Step by step, at an easy, natural pace. As you continue walking, become aware of the trees around you, tall and steady, their branches stretched overhead, leaves shifting gently in the breeze. Watch the sunlight filtering through the canopy, appearing and disappearing. Patches of light dancing across the path before you. Take a moment simply to notice. No need to analyse, no need to name or judge anything. Just observing. Now listen. Perhaps you can hear birdsong somewhere in the distance. A single call, then another. Maybe the soft rustle of leaves overhead, or the sound of wind moving through the trees. Allow these sounds to come and go naturally. Nothing to focus on, nothing to figure out, just listening. Now bring awareness to the air around you. Maybe there's a scent of damp earth after rain, the freshness of moss, the subtle fragrance of woodland growing quietly all around you. Take a slow breath in and notice whatever is there. As you continue walking, become aware of a feeling of spaciousness. Nothing important is happening. Nobody is asking anything of you. Nobody needs an answer right now. There are no deadlines, no expectations, no urgency. Just this path, this breath, this moment. And as you walk, notice how your mind begins to settle. Perhaps thoughts of yesterday drift away. Perhaps concerns about tomorrow grow a little quieter. You don't need to push them away. Simply let them pass as clouds pass through the sky. Returning gently to the experience of being here. Walking, breathing, observing, present. Take a few moments now in silence to simply enjoy this place. Allow yourself to rest in the feeling of being fully here. And perhaps you begin to realise that the gift isn't the forest itself. The gift is the permission. Permission to slow down. Permission to notice. Permission to pay attention to this breath, to this moment, to your own experience of being alive. Take one final deep breath in and slowly let it go. Begin to bring your awareness back to the room around you. Notice the surface supporting you. Notice the sounds nearby. Gently wiggle your fingers and toes. And when you're ready, slowly open your eyes. Carry this sense of presence with you, knowing that you can return to it whenever you choose. So, if you've never tried forest bathing, I'd encourage you to give it a go. Not because it's a miracle cure, not because it's going to solve loneliness, but because it might offer something many of us are missing: a little space, a little presence, a little solitude. And perhaps a reminder that being alone and being lonely are not always the same thing. Perhaps that's what the forest taught me, that being alone isn't always a problem to solve. Sometimes it's simply a place to begin. Thank you for listening to Lonely-ish. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And if you happen to find a patch of woodland, a quiet park, or even just a tree you like, spend a little time there. You might be surprised by what happens when you stop trying to get somewhere and simply allow yourself to be where you are. And as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Send me a message about your experiences or questions about loneliness, or even things that have helped you. My email is in the show notes. If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow and like and all that jazz. If you know someone who might benefit from this podcast, please share it. Let's keep connected. Bye.